when it comes to the film Deadpool and Wolverine, I'm going to be completely honest and say it's actually a really enjoyable movie, but it's not without its faults. But let's start with the positives. Firstly, the humour in this film is fantastic. We get so much comedy, whether it be just silly violence, whether it be in the comedic dialogue between Deadpool and Wolverine, whether it be just small characters with their minimal bits of dialogue, just really adding to the atmosphere. Honestly, right now I would say this is the funniest of the three films. I would say that it rarely feels out of place and it never loses its steam. Throughout the entire film, from beginning to end, it is hysterical. Even the post-credit scene is hilarious and is worth watching. Now, what I did love about this film is, even though it is owned by Disney, it goes into full Deadpool aesthetic, allowing him to have the foul language and to say some really depraved sex jokes, which does take you out of place and is quite shocking, but in a very good way. I will say it's quite intriguing to see the creators allowing Deadpool to dive deeper into his pansexuality, as in the previous films and in this one to a lesser extent, he has feelings for Vanessa and we know that, but in this they allow him to make more crude jokes of his own sexuality, and it's just interesting to see all of these type of jokes in a Disney funded movie of all things. It's quite intriguing. Now, I will say the violence in this film is again amazing. I've really enjoyed it from the very beginning, but I will say it feels a bit tamer compared to the previous two films. But that being said, there are two explicit scenes that really do shock you with the violence and its grotesqueness. Definitely keep your eye out for that if you haven't seen them. Now, one of the best things of this film is the chemistry between Deadpool and Wolverine. Somewhat a sibling relationship, with Deadpool being the younger brother and Wolverine being the older one. And we're always seeing them insulting one another, getting into real fights, but at the same time, the younger brother showing admiration and respect for his older brother, even if it kills him, metaphorically speaking. Now, another thing I enjoyed is throughout this film we get a lot of humour, and in certain scenes there's a lot of emotional vulnerability, and admittedly not as much as the previous two films, it's still nice to enjoy. And lastly, one of the biggest things I enjoyed was the cameos we get, whether it be the variations of Wolverine in relation to comic books, or just seeing cameos from other older Marvel movies and relations to 20th Century Fox. I just really enjoyed that. This film is essentially a love letter to old Marvel movies. Now, when it comes to the ending of this film, I'm going to be completely honest and say, whilst I did enjoy it, I did feel like one of the titular characters should have perished, making a huge and grandiose sacrifice to save the universe they're in, but instead they both survive and everything is somewhat back to normal. And I'm not mad at that, but at the same time, I just kind of thought it would have had a meaningful ending if one of them were to die. But at least we get to see a new Wolverine in Deadpool's universe. So there's ups and downs. Now, when it comes to criticisms, I will be honest and say I do have quite a few. A lot of them are a little bit nitpicky, but at the same time, let's start with the big ones. Now, when it comes to my first criticism, I feel like this film doesn't really change anything for Deadpool in the major scheme of things, as by the end of this film we still see he is dressing up as Deadpool, he is still in the X-Men universe, and no one he cared or loved for passed away. And if we really look at what has changed, it's not much. His relationship status has changed, but that could be fixed in the next film. He has a new Wolverine in his universe, and at the same time he has a dog that he loves. And the biggest change, I would say, compared to what happened in 2, is that the TVA now notice him, compared to the beginning of this film when they just wanted to use him. My other issue is I genuinely thought this film was going to be a MCU film taking not only Deadpool but the X-Men universe as a whole and moving it into the MCU. But instead that is not the case, and it's just about Deadpool saving his universe from extinction. And I do enjoy it, but this essentially is just a Disney funded Fox movie. And I'm not mad at it, but at the same time I just genuinely wanted to see a Deadpool MCU movie instead of what we got. I'm not mad at it, but He's not really in the MCU though, is he? Now, this is just a personal thing for me, but I feel like this film is too big, and especially compared to the other two, which I really enjoyed because of how limited it is. It felt so small, especially when you're comparing it to the average MCU movie. And so when we get this, it's too big to the point it's kind of off-putting. Especially because, maybe it's just me, but I really did enjoy the limited version of Deadpool that we've gotten. And this whole multiverse thing is a bit too much. Now, as much as I enjoyed the violence, I did say it felt tamer compared to the first two films. Now, admittedly, the first two were made in 2016, 2018, and since then, violence in movies and superhero projects have only escalated, especially in shows like The Boys and Invincible. So I was expecting the violence to be somewhat upgraded, but if anything, it's felt a bit of a drop, especially when we're comparing it to modern day superhero projects, and it's quite upsetting. And even though I said there were two instances which were really violent and did shock me, the rest of this film feels so Disneyfied with its violence. It's just a bit tame and it's slightly bothering. This is something that I really did find a bit disappointing, is how little we get from the recurring characters from the first two Deadpool films, as we get less than 10 minutes with these characters and then poof, they're gone. I really was disappointed with how little we got from them, as they would have worked so well, especially in the third act. I would have loved to see the X-Men characters from the Deadpool movies interacting in the fight scene for the third act, especially with who they're going against, yet they aren't used in that at all. But even without that, I just enjoy those characters, and it's sad we get such little from them. I hope we get to see more of them when Deadpool next returns, if he does return at all. I did touch upon this earlier. I do feel like Deadpool doesn't have that emotional element that he has been known for, especially in the first two films. There's glimpses here and there, but it's mostly been given to Wolverine, and what slightly is disappointing is Deadpool is just being the comedic character all the way through, never having that vulnerability that he is known for, and it can be slightly annoying, especially since that's what we like about his character. As foul-mouthed as he is, he has that vulnerability, but it's not always there, especially in this film. But my last critique is about the trailers, not the film itself, but the trailers, as I felt that they spoiled a lot of jokes and scenes, and also got audience members hyped up for what they built up to be quite big scenes, only for the film itself to somewhat mimic it and make it very short, somewhat killing the joke and making it a bit disappointing as well. So I kind of just wish they would limit what they show in trailers. I know it's supposed to be this big film, but at the same time they're spoiling too much with trailers. Now overall, I do enjoy this film, and whilst I do feel like, even though it's got the MCU attachment, it is just a Disney funded Fox film and a big love letter to 20th Century Fox and old Marvel films from the 2000s. I still do enjoy it. There is a bit of disappointment, but I do love the comedy and story that comes with it. Overall, is this film good? I'm going to be honest and say it really is good. Rating wise, it's a 7.5 out of 10. Now, would I rewatch this? Of course I'm rewatching it. Not only from a comedic standpoint, but the Easter eggs alone that I may have missed on the first watch, and characters who I may not have noticed during some great fight scenes. Now when it comes to recommendations, of course I'm going to recommend the first two Deadpool films because I think they're funny, they're violent, and have great plot and great character development. Next, I would recommend Logan, not only for the violence that we get and finally seeing Wolverine being that raw character, but at the same time it's a really emotional story as well. And then my last recommendation is Planes, Trains and Automobiles, as we are seeing two characters who slightly don't get along, but at the same time have respect for one another even if they don't want to admit it. And there's a bit of tragedy with both these characters. Also, there's a lot of great comedy shenanigans, and it is a travel film. I think both films have a lot of similarities you can see through that. Definitely recommend. Those are my recommendations. This has been my review for the film Deadpool and Wolverine. Thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed, please like and subscribe, but most importantly, thank you and have a nice day.